Well, hello there and good day. Thank you so much for joining me in Ariel's Writing Corner, the place where we hang out and talk about writing related stuff. I've missed doing these. Leave a comment, let me know your question, and I will answer it because I want more questions. Today we're talking about one I got from someone on Blue Sky, which is, what are some tools we can use to prevent the dreaded Saggy Middle Syndrome? First, let's identify what that is. So, Saggy Middle Syndrome is what I like to call when a book feels like there isn't very much going on in the middle of it, kind of like there are no supports holding the center of gravity up, hence saggy. So to give you the full screen so you can see this, right? Imagine my arms as a bridge, and the bridge is your book. And if you don't do enough to support the middle of your book, the middle starts to sag. And a little sag is natural, it happens, bridges sag all the time. But a lot of sag, and all of a sudden, it snaps and falls apart. You don't want that. I like the visual metaphor because it kind of tells you, like, yeah, readers will go along with a certain amount of sag. They expect a certain amount of sag. It's the middle. You're not at the climax yet, but you've already done most of your introductory stuff. You're just kind of in the middle. So how do we combat this and make this less of a problem so that people will finish your book? Well, first of all, you can detect this in the outlining phase of a novel. We've talked before on this channel about plotting versus pantsing and how they kind of are an alternating thing, where you plot to pants, you pants to plot. So you should be outlining, right? Because that's how you're going to know what's coming ahead. That's one way you're going to avoid this. A lot of times people have their middle sag because they don't know what they were planning to do next. They were just kind of hoping to get there, and they didn't get there. Now they have to make decisions about what they're doing in the past and in the future. Plan this out. Because here's the thing. You look for periods of time where you feel like the writing is slow. So you're going along, you're typing it out, and it feels like, I don't know what to write. I don't know what to put here. So you can experience that while you're drafting the project, but you can also experience that while you're outlining the project so that you don't get to the drafting part and realize this. And most of all, my advice, my biggest technique for this is to figure out subplots you can make progress with. Remember, you may have a solo protagonist story, but you still have secondary characters and stuff going on. You may have a solo point of view. That's a little harder to do this trick with. It's not really in my wheelhouse. I'm more multi-point of view person, but only like 3 in a book. Nowadays, anyway, I've dabbled with more in the past. So, you figure out the subplots you can make progress with. So, do you have a secondary character who has something going on? Have an event happen with them. And it can seem like a part of the climax for their storyline is coming up while you've got your main character's storyline still sort of making progress. This is when the good friend breaks up with his girlfriend, and you discover that, they were both just unfaithful messes to each other. I don't know, I'm making stuff up off the top of my head. That's kind of part of creativity. And so now you spend a scene where the protagonist speaks to his friend and is like, yo, man, you were both a mess. And maybe the protagonist learns something from that conversation that either helps them out in the end of the book when they get to their own climax, or at the very least helps change who they are as a person a little bit. So your goal is to be making change, even if you can't make major changes, because you're in the middle. You can't have them fight the big bad dragon at the end of the book in the middle, because then that's the end of the book. And what are we doing here? It doesn't make sense. So those are some suggestions. I'm not saying they're all perfect. I'm not saying they all work for every sort of story. I'm not saying they're always the best thing to work in, but if you do a combination of preventative monitoring and you detect it because you're doing this preventative upfront thinking, this brainstorming up front, and you're writing it out and you're going like, hey, this feels kind of slow. What can I do to add things? Your absolute worst case is what? You need to add some subplots. If you've got nothing going on in your book, you can either go to the end of the book and make it a novella instead of a novel, or you can, if you wish, go ahead and just add some subplots. If you feel like this is a really big thing where you don't even have characters to add subplots for, then a good old natural disaster of some sort literal calm before the storm, that might work too, because it might allow you to go, hey, I've got this lull that I have to have happen anyway, so I can describe how the storm passes over. Maybe the shelter that the heroes are in has a leak, and they're thinking about the leak, and then you just have a whole diversion about leaks. And it doesn't really fit the book, but it's also the kind of everyday stuff that people always hear. You always hear about how you want like some slice of life in your story. Well, everyone's sitting around a leaky roof while a thunderstorm passes over and threatens to drop a tree on them. That's some tension. That's some stress. That might have effects on how the characters do later. I don't know. Things like that are what I would suggest as ways to avoid saggy middle syndrome. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more writing advice videos like this, leave a comment, ask me a question. I will answer it as truthfully and fully as I can. Leave me a topic if you want me to just talk about a topic. I'll do that. And yeah, I hope to be doing this project more. I also hope to maybe be doing some non-writing corner stuff on this channel. This is my personal channel after all, and like, I kind of want to keep Ariel's writing corner because, you know, Ariel was my cat. She sat on the corner of my desk. What more can it be? But I also want to talk about stuff like, you know, I've been thinking about my role as an elder millennial of sorts and thinking about that. So I don't know, maybe I'll do a rant sometime, who knows. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. If you appreciate what I made, like I said, subscribe, you know, leave a comment, like the video, share it to your friends, share it to your writing community. Thank you all so much for joining me, and as always on this channel, pieces.